The courtroom was buzzing with energy, a mix of anticipation and anxiety hanging thick in the air. It was a moment that had been building for weeks, and today, the world would watch as the two titans, Elon Musk, the world-renowned entrepreneur, and Judge Evelyn Parker, the fearless and sharp-witted judge, faced off in what promised to be a showdown like no other. Elon Musk, often seen as a visionary, a genius of technology, and a man who had built empires, sat at the defendant's table, his usual calm demeanor slightly cracking under the intensity of the proceedings. The billion-dollar empire he had so meticulously built now hung in the balance, its fate resting on the outcome of this high-stakes legal battle. His usual confidence seemed less apparent as he glanced around the room, the eyes of the world upon him. Musk, a man who had spent decades carving his name into history, now found himself vulnerable, and the weight of it was unmistakable. Across from him, sitting at the elevated bench with a poised, unyielding posture, was Judge Evelyn Parker. Her sharp eyes scanned the room as she listened attentively to the arguments being presented, each word carefully weighed. She had a reputation for being one of the most intelligent and powerful judges in the country, known for her no-nonsense approach and a mind that could unravel even the most complicated of legal battles. Her reputation had spread far and wide, but it wasn't just her intellect that made her formidable, it was her courage to take on the giants, to stand firm even when the stakes were high. The courtroom went silent as Judge Parker's gavel struck the desk, calling the proceedings to order. The tension in the room grew thicker as everyone waited for her to speak. Musk's lawyers were strategizing, eyes darting nervously, knowing that Judge Parker had a reputation for laying bare the truth in a way that left no room for escape. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice clear and unwavering, "this case is about more than just financial transactions and corporate jargon. This is about accountability. It's about whether your actions have harmed the very people you claim to serve, the people who believed in your promises." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the air. "You, Mr. Musk, have been the face of a new era, an era that promised to change the world. But now, we must ask, at what cost?" Musk shifted in his seat, but his expression remained largely unchanged. He was no stranger to tough questions, but this one hit deeper. He had built an empire on innovation, on pushing boundaries, but now, the world was questioning whether that vision had crossed ethical lines. And at the helm of this inquiry was Evelyn Parker, a woman who wasn't afraid to tear down the giants in her courtroom. He had underestimated her, and now he could feel the full force of her scrutiny. As Musk opened his mouth to respond, Judge Parker raised a hand, signaling for him to hold his tongue. "I didn't ask for an answer, Mr. Musk. I asked for an explanation. You see, in this courtroom, the truth doesn't have the luxury of being hidden behind corporate lingo or behind the wealth of those who think they are untouchable. The truth is what I will get to today, one way or another." There was no mistaking the fire in her words, and the audience in the gallery, along with the millions watching on their screens, could feel the palpable tension that hung between the two. This wasn't going to be like the legal battles Musk was used to. This wasn't going to be an easy win, and he knew it. Judge Parker turned her attention to the evidence in front of her, flipping through a stack of documents. "Here," she said, pulling out a specific file. "Here's the piece of evidence that stands out to me. A document detailing a deal between your company and a government agency, one that could easily be seen as a conflict of interest. A deal that, had it been scrutinized, could have put your company under the microscope a long time ago. But instead of transparency, there was secrecy. Instead of accountability, there was silence." She paused again, letting the words sink in. "Now, Mr. Musk, what do you have to say about this?" Musk's gaze shifted downward, the first crack in his armor showing. He had been anticipating tough questions, but not this specific angle. He could feel the walls closing in on him. His reputation, his life's work, was under attack, and it was all happening right here, in this courtroom, in front of the whole world. The billionaire who had once been untouchable was now on the defensive. But Musk, ever the strategist, wasn't one to back down. He cleared his throat and stood up, his voice calm, though there was a slight edge to it. "Judge Parker, I understand your concerns, but let me be clear, what you have in front of you is not the full picture. Yes, there were mistakes, but they were unintentional. We were trying to push the boundaries of technology, to advance society. Sometimes, that requires making tough decisions, decisions that, in hindsight, we may not have gotten perfectly right. But to accuse me or my company of malicious intent is not only wrong, it's unjust." Judge Parker leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing as she listened intently. "Unjust? Mr. Musk, when you make decisions that impact not just shareholders but entire communities, entire nations, there is no room for unintentional. You may be used to playing by your own rules, but this courtroom has its own." The tension in the room grew thicker, the air crackling with anticipation. The public watching the trial at home, their eyes glued to the screens, could feel the immense weight of the moment. This was no longer just a legal dispute, it was a battle for Musk's future, for his legacy. The stakes had never been higher, and it seemed as though the outcome would determine more than just the fate of his company. It would determine whether Musk could retain his place as one of the most influential figures of his generation or if this moment would mark the beginning of his downfall. The moment was broken by a sudden interruption, a slip of paper falling from Musk's hands, unnoticed by anyone except Judge Parker. It was a small gesture, but one that caught her attention. As Musk bent to retrieve it, his eyes briefly met hers, and in that fleeting moment, a silent understanding passed between them. She saw something in him, a vulnerability, perhaps, something that Musk had tried to hide behind his bravado and larger-than-life persona. "Mr. Musk," Judge Parker said, her voice quieter now, almost as if speaking directly to him. "It's not too late to make things right." And with that, the gavel came down once again, signaling a brief recess before the trial would continue. The courtroom remained silent, the tension lingering in the air. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Evelyn Parker's life wasn't defined by a silver spoon or a privileged upbringing. In fact, she often reflected on how her story was more about survival than success. Raised in a modest household in a small town, her childhood had been shaped by the relentless demands of poverty and the harsh realities of a world that didn't care about dreams unless they were backed by money. But Evelyn was determined to prove herself, and every challenge she faced only fueled the fire that burned inside her. Her father, a factory worker who had spent years working long hours to provide for the family, had always spoken of the importance of justice, of right and wrong. But in her father's world, right and wrong often seemed to be dictated by wealth and power. He had never been able to rise above his circumstances, and that had always bothered Evelyn. She never wanted to be trapped in the same cycle. So, from a young age, she pushed herself harder than anyone else. She was determined to escape the limitations of her small-town existence, to break free from the shackles of financial instability. Evelyn's mother, a soft-spoken woman who had worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, often told her to stay grounded, no matter how high you climb. It was advice Evelyn would carry with her throughout her life, though it wasn't always easy to follow. When she got her first taste of power, being appointed to a prestigious law firm right out of law school, it was intoxicating. The bright lights of the big city, the feeling of being recognized for her intellect, it all made her feel unstoppable. But Evelyn never forgot where she came from. The world of law was cutthroat, and she learned quickly that success didn't come easily, especially for someone like her. She had to fight to be taken seriously in a male-dominated industry, where the men around her often dismissed her ideas as too radical. But what they didn't realize was that Evelyn's mind worked differently. She was able to see angles in cases that others missed, and her sharp legal instincts quickly made her a force to be reckoned with. Her breakthrough came when she represented a group of workers suing a powerful corporation for unsafe working conditions. The case was complex, but Evelyn's unwavering belief in justice pushed her to dig deeper, uncovering a web of corruption that led all the way to the top. Her victory in that case made her a household name in the legal world, and it was the turning point in her career. But it also changed her. It made her realize that power wasn't just about winning, it was about holding people accountable, no matter who they were or what they had. As she moved up the ranks, Evelyn's reputation as a no-nonsense, highly intelligent attorney earned her the respect of her peers. But it also made her a target. She had enemies, powerful enemies, who saw her as a threat to their carefully constructed worlds. When she was appointed to the bench, it was seen as a victory for those who believed in integrity and justice. But it also made her even more of a target for those who preferred to keep things in the shadows. Despite her success, Evelyn's personal life had always taken a back seat. She was single, never married, and often lonely. She didn't mind it much. Her career was her passion, and she had learned to deal with the loneliness that came with it. But every now and then, she would think back to her father, who had always wanted her to settle down, to live a normal life. That part of her felt a pang of guilt every time she thought about it. But she couldn't change the path she had chosen. She was too far gone. Too committed to her mission of justice. Evelyn's relationship with her father had always been complicated. He had raised her with the belief that hard work and honesty would lead to success. But over the years, as she became more immersed in the world of high-stakes law, she had come to realize that the world didn't always work that way. The powerful could get away with anything, and the rich had more say in how things played out. Her father had never been able to rise above his humble station, and Evelyn often wondered if that had shaped his worldview. He had always told her that she was different, that she had the potential to change things. But she couldn't help but feel that, in some ways, she had let him down. In her quiet moments, Evelyn would think about the compromises she'd made to get where she was. The late nights, the broken relationships, the sacrifices. She had built her career on the belief that justice would always prevail. But as she sat on the bench, surrounded by the power players of the world, men like Elon Musk, she began to question whether the system was really working the way she thought it should. Musk's case wasn't just another corporate lawsuit to her. It was personal. She saw in him the embodiment of everything she had spent her life fighting against, the unchecked power, the disregard for the little people, the hubris of someone who thought they were above the law. But at the same time, she couldn't deny the complexity of the situation. Musk was a visionary, a man who had changed the world in ways few others could. But with that power came responsibility, and it was clear to Evelyn that Musk had not always lived up to that responsibility. As the trial against Musk progressed, Evelyn found herself increasingly consumed by it. It wasn't just about the legal arguments anymore, it was about the larger moral questions that the case raised. Did Musk truly believe he was above the law, or was he simply too caught up in his own vision to see the harm he had caused? Was he a man who could be redeemed, or had he crossed a line from which there was no return? Her thoughts were interrupted as she sat in her chambers, reviewing the details of the case once again. The documents before her seemed like a jigsaw puzzle, pieces that didn't quite fit, each new revelation forcing her to rethink her position. It was clear that the man sitting in her courtroom was not a simple villain. There were layers to Musk, just as there were layers to the case. And as much as she wanted to make him pay for his mistakes, Evelyn knew that justice wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes, it was about understanding the bigger picture. But could she truly understand Musk? Could she find a way to balance the scales of justice, to ensure that he was held accountable without destroying everything he had worked for? The answer wasn't clear. And with each passing day, Evelyn found herself questioning whether the answer she sought would even be the right one. As the day of the trial loomed closer, Evelyn sat at her desk, deep in thought. A piece of paper caught her eye, an envelope she had forgotten about. Inside, a message that was both an invitation and a warning: "You're in over your head, Judge Parker. The truth is much more complicated than you think." Who could have sent this? And what did it mean for her, and for the trial? The next day, the courtroom was even more intense. The trial had become the talk of the town, and with every passing minute, more and more people were tuning in to see what would unfold. Elon Musk's empire was under scrutiny, but so was Judge Evelyn Parker's resolve. The world had seen her as a force of justice, but now the stakes were higher than ever. She was walking a fine line between upholding the law and ensuring that she didn't fall prey to the same power dynamics she had spent her life fighting against. The morning began with the defense team presenting their arguments, led by a lawyer with a sharp suit and a sharper tongue. He was trying to frame the case as a misunderstanding, an example of a visionary who simply got caught up in his own ambitious goals. The defense had to tread carefully, and they did, making sure not to poke at Judge Parker too aggressively. They needed her on their side, even if they knew that would be a tough sell. Elon Musk is a man who has changed the world, Your Honor, the defense attorney began, his voice smooth and persuasive. He's revolutionized industries, created thousands of jobs, and brought the future into the present. He is not a villain, he's a man driven by the dream of a better tomorrow. Yes, there have been bumps along the road, but they are not the actions of a criminal. They are the consequences of innovation. Musk sat at the table, his face still calm but betraying a flicker of something beneath the surface. His defense attorney was doing his best, but even he knew that this was more than just a courtroom battle. This was about public perception. If they couldn't win over Judge Parker, they might lose everything. Judge Parker listened closely but remained stoic. She had heard the argument before, the same one she had heard from powerful men all her life. That the ends justified the means. That visionaries had to make tough choices, and sometimes, people had to get hurt in the process. She had heard it from politicians, from CEOs, from the very same people who had created the broken system she fought against. I've heard all of this before, she finally responded, her voice cool and controlled, cutting through the air like a blade. Visionaries don't get a free pass when they make mistakes. In fact, the more powerful you become, the more responsibility you bear. Mr. Musk's vision may have changed the world, but that doesn't absolve him of the harm his company's actions have caused. There was a tense silence in the room. The defense lawyer looked momentarily taken aback, but he quickly recovered. But Judge Parker, surely you must see that what we're dealing with here is a man who is playing a role in shaping the future, and sometimes, people in that position have to take risks that others wouldn't understand. The world doesn't change by playing it safe. Judge Parker's eyes narrowed as she met his gaze. You're asking me to ignore the very real consequences of those risks. Tell me, Mr. Carter, what about the people who lost their jobs? The families left in turmoil because of decisions made from up high. Should we just sweep their lives aside because Musk is a visionary? Her voice carried the weight of 1,000 past cases, 1,000 instances where people in power had gone unchecked. Elon Musk had been watching the exchange carefully. His mind was working at 1,000,000 miles a minute. He was used to being the one who controlled the narrative, the one who held the cards. But Judge Parker wasn't buying into his carefully crafted image. And that made him uncomfortable. It made him vulnerable in a way that he hadn't been in years. His legal team had warned him that Judge Parker was unpredictable, that she wasn't afraid to go after anyone, no matter how powerful they were. But this was something else. It was as though she was pushing him to a point where he had to confront something deeper, something raw about himself and the empire he had built. His thoughts swirled around as he tried to formulate a response, but his gut told him this wasn't the time to give a corporate speech. He stood up, his voice quiet but firm, drawing the attention of the entire room. Judge Parker, he began, his eyes locking onto hers, I don't deny the mistakes my companies have made. I don't deny that we've taken risks. But I've always acted in good faith. Every decision I've made was with the belief that it would ultimately benefit humanity, even if it didn't seem like that at the time. He paused, as though weighing his next words carefully. The room fell silent, hanging on to every syllable. I've put everything I have into these projects, my time, my money, my heart. I've dedicated my life to advancing technology, to pushing humanity forward. Sometimes, people don't understand what we're doing, but that's not because we're wrong. It's because they don't see the bigger picture. For a moment, there was an unexpected stillness in the courtroom. Even Judge Parker seemed taken aback by the sincerity in Musk's voice. But she quickly masked it with her trademark stoicism, her sharp mind processing his words with the precision of a scalpel. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice icy once again, "you may believe in your own narrative. But this courtroom is not here to listen to your vision. It is here to determine whether or not your actions caused harm, and whether or not you are willing to take responsibility for those actions." The rising conflict between the two was palpable. Musk had always been a man who controlled the narrative, but Judge Parker had thrown him off balance. She wasn't interested in the grandiose ideas he had woven around his empire. She was only interested in the truth, and the truth was not something Musk could easily manipulate. For a brief moment, Musk's mind raced through a series of thoughts. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everything he had worked for. He wasn't just defending his companies, he was defending his identity, the legacy he had built, and the very foundation of his vision for the future. And now, facing a woman who seemed unwavering in her pursuit of justice, he realized that this battle was unlike any other he had ever faced. It wasn't just about winning or losing, it was about whether he could hold on to the image of himself that he had so carefully cultivated. Judge Parker stood and delivered her gavel with an authority that echoed through the courtroom, signaling the end of the day's proceedings. As the courtroom slowly emptied, Musk found himself unable to shake the feeling that the real battle had just begun. This wasn't about corporate decisions anymore. This was about who controlled the narrative, and whether he could rewrite it before it was too late. As Musk walked out of the courtroom, his mind was still reeling. His lawyer approached him with urgency, handing him a message. "We need to talk, now. It's about the envelope you got yesterday. It's not just a warning, it's a threat." What had Musk gotten himself into? And who was behind the ominous message? Elon Musk stood motionless for a moment, staring at the envelope his lawyer had handed him. His thoughts were a whirlwind, a mix of frustration, fear, and confusion. This trial was already more than he could handle, and now, this message, a cryptic warning, perhaps even a threat, was hanging over his head like a dark cloud. The room around him felt suddenly too small, too suffocating. "Mr. Musk," his lawyer's voice broke through his fog of thoughts, "we need to talk. This is serious." His lawyer's face was pale, and his voice had an edge of urgency Musk wasn't used to hearing. They walked to a private area, away from the prying eyes of the public and media. Musk's lawyer, Darren, immediately opened the envelope and pulled out the contents, more than just a note, but a series of papers with detailed information that Musk couldn't ignore. "These documents, they're pointing to something big, Elon," Darren continued, his brow furrowed. "It's not just about your companies. There's something deeper going on, something connected to your family, your wealth, and those who are really pulling the strings behind the scenes." Musk's heart skipped a beat. He had built his empire from the ground up. His name, his legacy, everything he had worked for, had been about making a mark on the world. But now, everything seemed to be unraveling in a way he couldn't understand. "Who sent this? Do you know?" Musk asked, trying to control the growing sense of panic. "I can't say for sure," Darren replied. "But it's clear that someone with very deep connections is involved. This isn't just corporate espionage, it's something more personal, something that targets you directly. These documents suggest that the trial you're facing isn't just about business malpractice. There's a much darker layer beneath the surface." Musk's mind raced. Could this be a coordinated attack on him, orchestrated by rivals in the tech world? Was someone trying to destroy his reputation? Or worse, was there something even more sinister at play? Before he could respond, Darren handed him a file containing a list of names, dates, and events that Musk had no recollection of. Some of the names were tied to projects he'd been a part of years ago, while others were familiar only in the vaguest sense: business associates, investors, and former employees. But there was one name that jumped off the page at him, Judge Evelyn Parker. "Wait," Musk said, his voice suddenly sharp. "Why is she listed here?" Darren hesitated. "I don't know yet, but it's clear that the case you're involved in isn't a coincidence. You've been targeted by someone who knows how to push your buttons. And it seems like Parker's role in this trial is more than just professional. She's been connected to some of the people involved in these incidents." Musk's mind reeled with the implications. Judge Evelyn Parker was no longer just an impartial figure in a courtroom, she was now a part of a much larger web, and he had no idea how deeply she was tied to everything that was happening. "I need to talk to her," Musk said, his voice low, almost to himself. "I need to figure out what this is all about." Darren looked at him, surprised. "Are you sure that's a good idea? You're in the middle of a trial, Elon. Pushing too hard could make things worse." But Musk was already set on his course. His usual bravado and calm demeanor had slipped away. There was something much bigger at stake here, and he couldn't sit back and wait for it to destroy everything he had built. If there was even a chance that Parker held the key to understanding what was going on, he had to take it. The next day, after court was adjourned, Musk found himself in an unfamiliar situation. He was sitting in a small, unmarked office building in the heart of the city, waiting for Judge Evelyn Parker. He had made the call, asked for a private meeting, and to his surprise, she had agreed. The room was stark, a reflection of the judge's no-nonsense approach to life. A simple wooden desk sat in the center, and the only decoration was a single black-and-white photograph on the wall, depicting a vast landscape of mountains. It was a symbol of resilience, something Musk could relate to. When Parker walked in, there was no hesitation in her step. She was a woman who commanded the space, her sharp gaze meeting his without a hint of surprise. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice measured. "I wasn't expecting to see you outside the courtroom." "I'm sure you weren't," Musk replied, standing up as she sat down across from him. "But I think we need to talk. I'm sure you've heard the rumors, but I don't believe everything that's going on here is as straightforward as it seems. I think you and I are both being manipulated, and I need your help to figure out who's behind it." Parker looked at him for a long moment, weighing his words. Then, slowly, she leaned forward, folding her hands on the table. "You're asking me to trust you, Mr. Musk, at a time when everything points to you being guilty of far more than just business mistakes. Why should I believe that your motives are anything more than self-preservation?" Musk's jaw tightened. "Because I don't care about the public image you've heard about. The Musk that people know, that billionaire with an ego and a vision, I'm done with that. I want to understand the truth. And I need you to help me do that." There was a flicker in Parker's eyes, a subtle shift in the air between them. She was no longer just the judge who was deciding his fate. She was someone who, like him, had once fought to rise to the top. And like him, she understood that sometimes, the truth wasn't just about what you saw on the surface, it was about the hidden forces pulling the strings in the background. "I'll help you," she said finally, her voice low and resolute. "But know this, Mr. Musk, there's no going back from this. Once we start, we uncover everything. And you may not like what we find." Musk nodded, his resolve hardening. He had no idea where this journey would lead, but he knew one thing for sure, the stakes had just gotten much higher. As Musk and Parker began to exchange details about the case, the door to the office creaked open. A man in a dark suit entered, his face obscured by a mask. He handed Parker a sealed envelope, his eyes locking with hers for just a moment before he disappeared as quickly as he had come. Parker opened the envelope, and Musk's heart stopped when he saw her face change. The message inside was clear: "Stop digging, or you will never see the truth again." The clock was ticking. The truth was slipping further away, and someone powerful was determined to keep it buried. The silence in the room was thick with tension. Musk's mind raced as he watched Judge Evelyn Parker's eyes scan the contents of the sealed envelope. He had seen that expression on her face before, a combination of fear, resolve, and a flicker of something else. She wasn't just reading the words, she was processing them, trying to figure out what this meant for everything they had just started. Musk could feel his heart pounding in his chest. His fingers clenched into fists, but his voice was steady. "What does it say?" Parker didn't answer right away. Instead, she carefully folded the paper, her hands moving with a calm precision that contrasted with the storm brewing inside her. She looked up at Musk, her eyes narrowing as though she were measuring him, gauging his reaction. "It's a warning," she said quietly, her voice unusually soft. "And it's clear that they don't want us to dig any deeper. But we're already too far in, Mr. Musk." "Who are they?" Musk's voice had an edge of desperation now, as the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place, but not in the way he had hoped. His mind had been working overtime since he'd read the first document Darren had handed him. Something big was happening, something beyond just business or legal issues. Parker looked at him for a long moment, her gaze unreadable. She was considering something, weighing whether or not to trust him with the truth. Finally, she exhaled slowly, her shoulders slumping slightly as the weight of the situation bore down on her. "It's not just about you, Elon. This goes much deeper, into the people who funded your companies, the investors, and the powerful families who control more than just the stock market or the tech industry. This is about control. And they've been pulling strings for a long time." Musk felt a cold chill run down his spine. It wasn't the revelation he had expected, but it was worse, far worse. He had always known that there were powerful forces working in the background of his business deals, but this was something else entirely. It was a shadowy cabal, an undercurrent of influence that stretched far beyond the people he had interacted with, far beyond his knowledge. "Are you telling me that someone has been orchestrating this entire situation?" Musk asked, his voice low. "That this trial, my companies, the risks we've taken, it's all part of some grand design?" Parker nodded slowly. "Yes. There are people who want to make sure that certain technologies never see the light of day, and others who want to control how the world's wealth is distributed. You've been a part of that, whether you realized it or not." The words hit Musk harder than he expected. He had always prided himself on his independence, on being the one to challenge the system, to disrupt industries, to push humanity forward. But now, it felt like everything he had built was not his own. It was part of a game he didn't fully understand, and the stakes were far higher than any tech rivalry or boardroom battle. Parker stood up, pacing back and forth as she spoke, her hands clasped behind her back. "You've been a pawn, Elon, but not in the way you think. The people who are really in control, they want you to fail. They want to make sure you and others like you never have the power to change anything." Musk's head was spinning. He had spent his life chasing the impossible, believing in a future that was brighter, more sustainable, and more connected. Now, he was faced with the reality that the forces behind his success, and behind the failure of many others, were more sinister than he could have ever imagined. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Then why did you help me? Why did you agree to meet with me?" Parker stopped pacing and looked him squarely in the eye. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Because I've been fighting against them for years. The system is rigged, Elon. But even a judge can't do this alone. I've had to toe the line for so long, and it's gotten harder to see where justice ends and power begins. But now that we're in this together, there's no going back." Musk stared at her, a mix of disbelief and gratitude bubbling up inside him. Here was the woman who had been unflinching in her pursuit of justice, even when the world had tried to tear her down. And now, she was standing beside him, offering him a glimpse into the deeper, darker world that had manipulated him and so many others. "We need to figure out who's really behind this," Musk said, his voice stronger now. He wasn't going to let the walls close in on him, not without a fight. "If they've been controlling everything, we need to expose them. We need to tear down the system that's been using people like us as pawns." Parker looked at him for a long time, her eyes hard. This won't be easy. You'll be targeted. I'll be targeted. And if we go public with this, we could bring down more than just your empire. We could bring down everything. Musk nodded, his face hardening with determination. I didn't come this far just to back down now. Parker sat back down, and for the first time, a flicker of something almost like admiration passed over her face. You're right. If we're going to do this, we need to move carefully. There's too much at stake to rush in blindly. But if we expose these people, we're going to have to be prepared for anything. They'll come after us. The room was heavy with the weight of her words. Musk had faced danger before, he had battled through countless risks in his business ventures, but this was different. This wasn't just about losing money or status. This was about power on a level he had never dreamed of. And now, more than ever, he understood the magnitude of what was at stake. I'm ready, Musk said, his voice unwavering. Let's tear down the system. Parker looked at him one last time, her gaze piercing. You may regret this, Elon. The truth always comes with a price. And just like that, everything changed. Suddenly, the door to the office swung open with force, and a man in a dark trench coat stepped in. He wasn't anyone Musk recognized, but the look in his eyes made it clear he wasn't a friend. The man stepped toward them, his face expressionless, and handed Parker another envelope, this time, a single sheet of paper. Parker's face drained of color as she read it, her hand shaking slightly. It's happening already, she whispered. Musk's heart stopped. On the paper were 2 words, too late. Before he could react, the man in the trench coat turned and left, disappearing into the shadows as if he had never been there at all. Now, they were in deeper than they had ever imagined. And there was no turning back. Musk's mind raced as he stared at the man's retreating figure. The room felt smaller, darker, the walls seemingly closing in on him. The cold words on the piece of paper, too late, echoed in his head, chilling him to his core. Whoever was behind this, whoever had orchestrated everything, had just moved the game to a level he could barely comprehend. Parker's hands trembled slightly as she set the paper down on the desk. The usually composed and resolute judge now seemed shaken, her face pale as she took a slow, deep breath. This is bad, she said quietly, almost to herself, as she ran her fingers through her hair in agitation. I knew they would make a move, but not this quickly. Musk took a step forward, unable to ignore the gnawing sense of urgency eating away at him. What does it mean? Too late. What are they going to do? Parker looked at him with a cold, calculating expression, but her eyes still betrayed the fear she was trying to suppress. It means they've already anticipated us. They know we're looking. They know that we're trying to uncover the truth. And now, they'll come for both of us. The game has shifted, Elon. Musk clenched his jaw. The sudden realization hit him harder than anything before. All his life, he had been the one to challenge the system, to disrupt industries, believing that with enough innovation and willpower, he could change the world. But this wasn't a game of tech and innovation. This was a much darker, more dangerous game. How do we stop them? Musk asked, his voice now steely with resolve. He was used to fighting back when it seemed impossible, but this? This was uncharted territory. We need to strike first. We need to go on the offensive. Parker stood up slowly, shaking her head. It's not that simple, Elon. They're everywhere. The people who run the strings behind the scenes, they're embedded in everything, politics, business, the judiciary. They're in control of more than just your empire. They're the ones who determine who wins and who loses. Musk's thoughts flashed back to the documents Darren had shown him, the names, the dates, the connections between the most powerful people in the world. Judge Parker wasn't just caught in the middle of this fight, she had been a part of the larger system all along. But even she had become a target. He stepped toward her, his gaze intense. We can't let them control this. Not anymore. We can fight back, expose them. We have to. Parker's eyes narrowed as she considered him, a flicker of admiration crossing her face. But there was a darker undertone to her expression. You don't get it, do you? It's not just about exposing them. This isn't a fight where truth will be enough. They've already covered their tracks. They've anticipated moves like ours for years. They'll make sure you fall, and anyone who tries to help you will fall with you. Musk's fists clenched. He had spent his entire career proving people wrong, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. This was no different. He couldn't back down now. He had come too far. But as Parker's words settled in, a cold realization hit him. The system they built wasn't something he could just tear down with a few legal moves or a new business venture. This was deeper. More insidious. More dangerous. Then what do we do? Musk demanded, frustration building in his chest. I didn't come this far to just give up. Parker sighed deeply, her face drawn with the weight of her own battles. We play their game. We need to get in deeper. If we're going to expose them, we need to understand how they think, how they operate. And that means using the same methods they've been using for years. Information. Influence. Control. We need to get access to their inner circle. Musk's mind flashed back to the people in the documents. The names he had barely recognized, the strange connections that seemed to lead nowhere, until now. If the judge was right, the only way to beat these people was to enter their world, to see things from their perspective. He couldn't just fight them head-on, he needed to understand the game at a fundamental level. I'm in, Musk said, his tone resolute. Whatever it takes. Parker gave him a slow nod, but there was no warmth in her gaze. Be careful what you wish for, Elon. You think you're ready, but once we start, there's no turning back. These people don't care about laws, morals, or ethics. They only care about power. Musk stared at her, the reality of the situation sinking in. Power. The one thing he had spent his entire life trying to gain. But now, it was the very thing that was holding him hostage. He wasn't just fighting for his future. He was fighting for his survival. Later that evening, Musk returned to his mansion, his mind reeling. Every room felt like a ghost of his former life. The tech mogul, the innovator, the billionaire with a vision, he was no longer the man he used to be. The walls of his carefully constructed empire were crumbling. And the worst part was, he had no idea who was pulling the strings or how deep the conspiracy ran. As he sat in his study, staring out over the city skyline, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Darren, his lawyer. We need to meet. They know we're coming for them. Be prepared. The words were simple, but they struck fear into Musk's heart. He didn't need to ask who they were. The people who had been manipulating him, who had orchestrated this entire mess, were closing in. He picked up the phone and dialed Parker's number. The phone rang twice before she answered. I'm ready to take the next step, he said without preamble. Let's do this. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. And then Parker's voice, calm but with an underlying current of tension, replied. It's already too late, Elon. They've already made their move. We need to be smarter than them if we want to survive this. Musk leaned back in his chair, a cold realization creeping up his spine. His every instinct told him that he was in deeper than ever. And he knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that the real battle had just begun. Suddenly, the lights in Musk's mansion flickered, and the familiar hum of electricity cut out. He stood up quickly, his senses heightened. There was something off about the stillness that followed, something eerie. Then, his phone buzzed again. This time, the message was different. It wasn't from Darren. It was from an unknown number. It's already begun. You can't stop it now. The message sent a chill down Musk's spine. Whoever they were, whoever was pulling the strings, they had just shown their hand. And Musk realized, with a sinking feeling, that this game was far from over. Musk's heart raced, his eyes fixed on the cold, impersonal text message on his phone. It's already begun. You can't stop it now. The words hit him like a punch to the gut, but he forced himself to take a steadying breath. He couldn't afford to panic. Not now. Not when everything he had worked for, and everything he had just begun to understand, was hanging in the balance. His mansion, usually a place of peace and refuge, now felt like a cage. The silence was oppressive, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch farther than they should. Musk had faced countless challenges in his life, from rocket launches to artificial intelligence, but this was different. This wasn't just about innovation or competition. This was about survival. He quickly dialed Parker's number again, but this time, it went straight to voicemail. His stomach twisted. If Parker wasn't answering, it meant she was already in danger, too. The walls were closing in, and he wasn't sure where the threat was coming from, but he knew it was real. After a few minutes, he couldn't sit still any longer. He grabbed his coat and rushed out of the house, the cool night air doing little to calm his frayed nerves. His mind was racing. The messages, the threats, the mounting pressure, everything was happening faster than he could process. He needed to see Darren. They needed to figure out what was happening and what the next step was. The drive to Darren's office was a blur. His thoughts were consumed by the encrypted message, by the weight of the situation. By the fact that he was no longer playing a game of tech and business. He was in the middle of something much darker, something that threatened not only his career but his life. And the lives of those he cared about. When he arrived at Darren's office, the parking lot was eerily empty. No lights, no signs of life. A chill ran through Musk's spine as he stepped out of his car, every sense on high alert. He approached the building, the sound of his footsteps the only thing breaking the silence of the night. Something wasn't right. He pushed open the door, and the first thing he noticed was the flickering light above him. The office was dark, the air thick with tension. No one was there. No receptionist. No assistants. Just empty desks, stacks of papers, and the dim hum of the building's electricity. Musk, a voice suddenly called from the shadows, making him jump. It was Darren. He stepped out from the darkness, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a rare, unsettling urgency. His face was pale, his eyes wide with worry. "What's going on?" Musk demanded, his voice tight with fear. "I just got a message, it's already begun." "What the hell does that mean, Darren?" Darren looked around nervously, as though making sure no one was listening. "You weren't supposed to get that message yet," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "They've already put their plan into motion, Musk. They've been tracking us, watching our every move for months. You're being set up, and so am I. They want us to self-destruct before we can take them down." Musk's mind spun. "Set up? How? We haven't even exposed them yet." Darren paced, his face drawn with anxiety. "They don't need us to expose them. They know how to manipulate the narrative. They control everything, from the media to the financial markets. They'll make sure the public believes we're the ones behind all this, corruption, fraud, tech monopolies, it won't matter what we say. Once they start, there's no going back." Musk clenched his jaw, frustration building. "So, what do we do now? Just lay down and let them take everything? Let them control the story?" Darren's expression grew darker, more serious. "No, but we have to be smarter than that. We need to gather information from the inside, find the connections. But right now, we're exposed. They've already begun discrediting us behind the scenes. We need to move fast before they make the first move on us." As Darren spoke, Musk's phone buzzed again. He quickly pulled it out, his heart skipping a beat when he saw the name on the screen, Judge Evelyn Parker. He answered it immediately. "Parker, where are you?" "I'm not sure how long I'll have this line," she said, her voice hushed, urgent. "Listen, they know I've been helping you. I don't know how, but they've traced every move we've made. They'll come after me soon, and they'll make sure you're next. You need to get out. Go underground. It's the only way to stay safe now." Musk's heart sank. He had known the stakes were high, but hearing it from Parker, the one person who had been his ally, made it feel all too real. "I'm not leaving you," Musk replied, his voice firm despite the anxiety gnawing at him. "We're in this together. We'll fight them together." There was a long pause before Parker spoke again, her voice low and filled with a heavy sadness. "You don't understand, Elon. I've been trying to take them down for years. But now it's too late. They're everywhere. They own everything. They'll come for you, and they won't stop. I'm already a target, and there's nothing more I can do for you. But you need to get out before they do to you what they did to the others." Musk's throat tightened. "What happened to the others?" "They disappeared," Parker said quietly. "And I don't mean metaphorically. They were erased. Off the radar. No records. Nothing." The call ended abruptly, leaving Musk staring at the phone in his hand, his mind reeling. Erased. The word echoed in his mind, growing louder with each passing second. Darren watched him closely. "It's worse than we thought, isn't it?" Musk nodded slowly. "They've already begun. And they'll stop at nothing to make sure we don't win. But I'm not backing down. Not now." As the words left his mouth, he felt the gravity of the situation. The real battle wasn't in a courtroom or a boardroom. It was a fight for survival. And in this game, there were no rules. A sudden crash echoed through the building. The door to Darren's office burst open, and armed men stormed in, their faces masked, their movements calculated. Darren grabbed Musk by the arm and yanked him toward the back door. "We need to move. Now," he shouted. Musk's pulse raced as he followed Darren, adrenaline flooding his system. They were out of time. They were no longer just fighting for the truth, they were fighting to stay alive. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, those who had orchestrated it all were watching, waiting for them to make a mistake. The game was on, and the stakes had just been raised. Musk's heart was pounding in his chest as Darren yanked him through the narrow hallway. The building felt like it was closing in on them. Every step was heavy, every corner a potential threat. Musk's mind raced, trying to process everything that had just happened, the sudden ambush, the masked men, the growing realization that he was being hunted. The room he had just been in was now filled with a sickening silence, but he knew better than to believe it was over. They had only just begun. Darren pushed him into a small service elevator at the end of the hallway, slamming the button for the ground floor. The elevator jerked into motion, its rusty cables groaning under the strain. Musk glanced at Darren, whose face was hard with determination, but there was an edge of fear there too. This wasn't the confident lawyer Musk was used to. This was a man trying to survive. "They're coming for us, Elon," Darren said between gritted teeth. "They know we've made our move. We need to disappear. Fast." Musk clenched his jaw, his hands shaking with adrenaline. The world had just become much smaller, much darker. The realization was sinking in, his empire, his fortune, his innovations, they were meaningless in the face of this overwhelming force. These people had power that Musk couldn't fathom. And they weren't going to stop until they destroyed him. The elevator came to a shuddering halt, and the doors opened with a soft ding. Darren was already moving, grabbing Musk's arm and guiding him through the dark, empty lobby. The quiet hum of the building felt eerie now, like a predator lurking just out of sight, watching their every move. "Where are we going?" Musk asked, keeping his voice low, trying not to alert anyone to their presence. "There's an old safe house I use when things get complicated," Darren answered. It's off the grid, isolated. They won't be able to track us there. But we don't have much time. We need to get out of here before they realize what we're up to. As they exited the building, the night air hit Musk's face like a slap. The cool breeze should have been comforting, but instead, it heightened the sense of urgency. The world outside was no longer a place where he was in control. He was a target now, exposed, vulnerable. Do you have any idea who's behind all this? Musk asked, his mind still struggling to make sense of everything. Who's pulling the strings? Darren shook his head. Not exactly. But I have a suspicion. Someone with a lot of power. The kind of person who operates from the shadows, controlling the game from behind closed doors. They've been manipulating everything for years. You're just the latest target. Musk's thoughts went to the people he had once trusted, the allies he had made in his rise to power. Who could have turned on him like this? Who had the reach, the influence, the resources to orchestrate a campaign this vast? As they walked quickly through the parking lot, Musk's mind was a blur. He had spent his whole life battling against competitors in business, disrupting industries, and challenging norms. But this? This wasn't business. This was war. Darren led him to a sleek, black car parked in the far corner of the lot. They both got in, and Darren started the engine, pulling out of the parking lot with a sharp turn. The city lights blurred around them, casting fleeting reflections on the windows. Musk didn't dare look back. The feeling of being hunted was too real. As they drove, Darren glanced over at Musk, his eyes filled with a mix of concern and frustration. I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. The people behind this, if we're right, they're everywhere. They've already started framing you. Your next move needs to be quick, or they'll control the narrative. Musk's grip on the seat tightened. So what's the next step? We can't just hide. We need to fight back. Darren was quiet for a long moment, his face shadowed in the dim light of the dashboard. Finally, he spoke. We need to find someone who knows their playbook. Someone who's been inside their circle. And I know exactly who that is. Musk turned toward him sharply. Who? Parker, Darren said, his voice a low whisper. She's not just a judge. She's been working with them for years. She knows how they operate. But you can't trust her completely. She's in just as deep as we are. But right now, she's the only one who can help us. Musk's stomach churned. He had trusted Parker. She had been his ally in this fight, and now Darren was suggesting she might be involved with the very people they were trying to take down. I don't know, Musk muttered. I don't know if we can trust her anymore. Darren gave him a hard look. We don't have a choice. The people we're dealing with have eyes and ears everywhere. Parker is the only person with access to the inside information we need. And unless we want to be erased like everyone else, we need her. Musk nodded reluctantly, his mind still conflicted. This was far more complicated than he had imagined, and trust seemed like a luxury he couldn't afford. But Darren was right about one thing, they needed information. They needed a plan. A few hours later, they arrived at the safe house, a secluded house in the hills, tucked away from prying eyes. Musk could feel the tension in his muscles ease slightly as he stepped out of the car. At least for now, they were safe. But he knew that peace wouldn't last long. The storm was only just beginning. Darren led Musk through the front door and into a small, dimly lit room. There was a table in the center, covered with maps and papers. Musk sat down, his mind still racing as Darren locked the door behind him. We need to find Parker. I'll get in touch with her, Darren said, pulling out his phone and beginning to dial. But we can't go public with this yet. The moment we do, we'll be painted as the villains. Musk was silent, staring out the window at the darkened sky. The weight of the situation was bearing down on him. He had never felt so powerless. The idea that there were forces bigger than him, that no amount of money, influence, or power could protect him, was unsettling. But that wasn't going to stop him. No one was going to take everything he'd built without a fight. Suddenly, Musk's phone buzzed on the table, cutting through the silence. He grabbed it, his breath catching in his throat when he saw the name on the screen, Judge Evelyn Parker. Darren looked up sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Answer it. But be careful." Musk took a deep breath and swiped to accept the call. "Elon," Parker's voice came through, shaky but urgent. "They know where I am. I've been compromised. They're coming for me, and you're next." Musk's heart skipped a beat at Parker's voice. He had known things were bad, but hearing the fear in her tone made it all too real. He didn't hesitate. "What do you mean they're coming for you? Where are you?" he asked, his voice sharp. "I'm not sure how long I can keep this line open," Parker responded quickly, her words rushing together. "I'm in a safe house, but it won't hold for long. I made a mistake, Elon. They've been monitoring every move I make. They know I've been in contact with you. They're closing in, and they won't stop until they take us down." Musk felt the weight of her words crash over him. They're closing in. That was all the confirmation he needed. It was no longer just about taking down an enemy, it was about survival. He could feel it now, the heat of the noose tightening around them, the undeniable truth that they had crossed a line. They were in the game now, and the stakes were higher than ever. "Parker, listen to me. We'll find you. We'll get you out of there," Musk said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "But you have to tell me everything you know. We don't have time to waste." Parker was silent for a moment. He could almost hear her breath, shallow and hurried, before she spoke again. "They've got everything planned. The public relations campaign, the media blackout. They're going to use the courts, the government, everything they have to twist the narrative. They'll make us out to be criminals, conspirators, anything to justify their actions. It's not just about you anymore, Elon. It's bigger than you or me. They want to control everything." Musk's mind raced, trying to process the gravity of her words. This wasn't just about taking down his companies. It was about something much more sinister. Someone wanted power, and they were willing to destroy everything and everyone in their path to get it. "Parker, who are they?" Musk asked, his voice low and steady. "Who's behind all of this?" The line crackled, and for a moment, Musk thought the call had dropped. But then Parker's voice came through, barely a whisper. They're untouchable. No one knows who they really are. But I've been digging for years. They've infiltrated every level of government, finance, and tech. They're the ones who control the narratives, who fund the wars, who pull the strings behind closed doors. And they've been using people like us as pawns in their game." Musk's mind reeled as he processed her words. He had heard rumors, whispers of a shadow organization that controlled everything from global economies to the media, but he had always dismissed them as conspiracy theories. Now, hearing Parker's voice tremble as she spoke, he realized how wrong he had been. "They'll make sure no one believes us," she continued, her voice cracking. "They'll silence us, Elon. They've done it before. And they'll do it again." "Parker, stop. We're not going down without a fight," Musk said, his voice firm. "I've spent my entire life challenging the status quo. I'm not about to let them win now." There was a long pause on the other end, and Musk could almost hear Parker weighing his words. "I wish I could believe that, Elon. But they have eyes everywhere. I don't know how much longer I can hold out. They're already here." Suddenly, Musk heard the unmistakable sound of gunshots in the background, followed by the sound of footsteps. Parker's breath quickened. "Parker! Get out of there!" Musk shouted, his heart racing. "Do you have an escape plan?" She was cut off by another loud bang, followed by a scream. "They're here. They've found me." The call abruptly ended, leaving Musk staring at his phone in shock. His chest tightened with panic, his mind spinning. He had to do something. He couldn't just sit there and let Parker be taken. Not after everything they had gone through together. "Darren!" Musk shouted, his voice urgent. "We need to move. They've got her. We need to get to her, now." Darren, who had been quietly scanning through his contacts, looked up sharply. "What happened? Is she okay?" Musk didn't wait for an answer. "They're coming for her. And if we don't act fast, they'll take her out just like everyone else. We have to get to her before they do." Darren's face hardened, his earlier anxiety now replaced by a cold, steely focus. "All right, I've got a contact in the underground. We'll get you there. But it's not going to be easy. We're up against an army, and they won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in their way." Musk didn't care. He didn't have time for hesitation. "Let's move. Now." The drive to the safe house was a blur. Musk could barely think, his thoughts consumed by the urgency of the situation. He had fought countless battles in his life, against competitors, against technology, even against himself, but this? This was something entirely different. This was a battle for survival, and every second counted. As Darren navigated the winding roads, Musk's mind raced. Who are they? He kept asking himself. Who's behind all this? The answer eluded him, but one thing was clear, they were up against an enemy that didn't play by the rules. An enemy that had the power to destroy everything in their path. "Here," Darren said, pulling up to a nondescript building on the outskirts of town. It looked like any other warehouse, old, unassuming, and completely out of place. But to Musk, it was their only hope. "Stay sharp," Darren warned, glancing at Musk. "They could be waiting for us." Musk nodded, adrenaline pumping through his veins. They stepped out of the car, their footsteps silent on the gravel. As they approached the building, Musk could feel the tension in the air. Every sense was heightened, every instinct screaming that they were being watched. When they reached the door, Darren stopped and motioned for Musk to be quiet. He pulled out a keycard and swiped it through the lock. The door clicked open, and they stepped inside. It was dark. Cold. Empty. "We're not alone," Darren whispered, his eyes scanning the shadows. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the darkness. "You're late." Musk's heart stopped. The voice was familiar, too familiar. From the shadows emerged a figure, and for a split second, Musk thought he was seeing a ghost. It was Parker. But something was different. Her eyes were cold, calculating. And in her hands, she held a gun. "You shouldn't have come here, Elon," she said softly. "I tried to warn you." Musk stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. The woman who had once been his ally, the one who had helped him navigate the dangerous waters of the legal system, was now pointing a gun at him. The cold, metallic barrel of the weapon gleamed in the dim light of the warehouse, and for a moment, Musk wondered if this was the end. He had never imagined that Parker, the same woman who had given him invaluable insights and advice, would ever betray him. But the icy look in her eyes told him all he needed to know. "Parker, what the hell is this?" Musk asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His hands instinctively raised, palms facing her, trying to show he wasn't a threat. But even in the face of danger, his mind was still reeling from the shock. This couldn't be real. There had to be an explanation. Parker's lips curled into a twisted smile. "You should have known, Elon. You've been playing a dangerous game from the very beginning. Did you really think I was on your side? Did you really think that any of this was ever about justice?" Musk's stomach churned, and he took a step back, his mind racing for a way out. But the gun trained on him never wavered. "No. I refuse to believe it. This is some kind of setup. You've been playing a game, what, for them? Musk couldn't finish the sentence. The realization hit him like a brick wall. She's working for them. Parker didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate step forward, keeping the gun steady in her hand. You think you know everything, don't you, Elon? The media, the public, they all fall for your story. The misunderstood genius. The rebel. But you're just another pawn. You've been too focused on your little tech empire to see the bigger picture. They saw the potential in you long before you ever realized it. You've been useful to them. But now you're expendable. Musk's chest tightened with fury. I didn't build all this for them, he spat, the words coming out with an edge of defiance. I built it to change the world. Not to be someone's puppet. Parker's expression softened, almost pitying. That's where you're wrong, Elon. You've already been changed. They've been shaping you, guiding you, and now you're one of them. You just don't know it yet. Her gaze flicked to Darren, who was standing motionless behind Musk. And as for you, Darren. You were always a loose end. Darren flinched, his eyes flickering with confusion. Parker, this isn't you. You can't. It is me, she interrupted, her voice growing harder. It always has been. I've been playing both sides for years, keeping my position secure. And now it's too late for you, Elon. Too late to turn back. You're not the hero you think you are. You're just another player in a game much bigger than you can understand. Musk felt a chill run down his spine. The pieces were falling into place. Parker's sudden coldness, her cryptic warnings, the secrecy surrounding her role in all this, it all made sense now. But what didn't make sense was why she had helped him, why she had been working with him up until now if she was already playing for the other side. Why help me at all? Musk demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and anger. Why get me this far if you were just going to betray me? Parker's eyes narrowed. Because I needed you. You were a stepping stone. I knew you'd get in too deep, and when you did, I'd be the one to take you down. But you weren't supposed to find out this soon. This was all supposed to go much smoother. Musk took another step back, his mind whirling. This was worse than he could have imagined. His entire life, his entire career, had been built on the idea of innovation, of pushing boundaries. But now it seemed that someone had been pulling the strings all along, manipulating him from the shadows. All those moments he had thought were victories. They had been orchestrated from the start. Before he could speak again, Parker's voice rang out with a finality that shook him. There's nothing more to say, Elon. The game is over. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the back of the warehouse, followed by shouting. Musk instinctively spun around, his heart racing, as a group of armed men stormed into the room. They were all dressed in black tactical gear, their faces obscured by masks. Musk didn't need to guess who they were. The operatives. Parker didn't flinch. She simply stepped back, her gun still aimed at Musk. You wanted to fight them, Elon. Well, now's your chance. You're not getting out of here alive unless you make a choice. The operatives closed in, their footsteps echoing through the warehouse. Musk felt trapped, cornered, with nowhere to run. His mind scrambled for a way out, for a plan that would give him a chance. But it was clear now. This wasn't just about survival, it was about dismantling everything he had built. Everything he had worked for. Darren stepped forward, his face set in a mask of determination. We're not going down like this, he said, his voice steady. We're getting out, and we're taking them down with us. But before Musk could respond, Parker raised her hand. The operatives froze. She looked at Musk one last time, her expression unreadable. You can fight all you want, Elon, she said, almost too quietly. But you're too late. The world you thought you knew. It's already gone. Then, without another word, she turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Musk and Darren standing there, staring at the encroaching army. As the operatives advanced on them, Musk's mind raced. His hands shook, but his resolve was hardening. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was a war. And it was time to take the fight to them. With a swift glance at Darren, Musk knew what had to be done. "Let's go," Musk said, his voice low and cold. "We fight." Just as the first operative lunged forward, there was a sudden, deafening explosion, and the entire building shook. Musk's world went dark. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? When the explosion rocked the warehouse, Musk's body was thrown backward. His head slammed against the cold concrete floor, and for a moment, everything went black. The world spun in dizzying circles, and he struggled to stay conscious, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His ears rang from the blast, and the once oppressive silence was now filled with the sound of chaos, gunfire, shouting, and the distant roar of something large burning. "Get up," he told himself, pushing against the cold, hard ground with his hands. His mind was still in a haze, but Musk didn't have time to process the pain. The explosion had created a momentary distraction, a window of opportunity. The operatives had been temporarily disoriented by the blast. That was the opening they needed. With a grunt, he forced himself to his feet. His legs wobbled beneath him, but adrenaline kicked in, steadying his resolve. His eyes darted around the warehouse, trying to regain some semblance of control. The room was filled with thick, acrid smoke from the explosion, and the once dimly lit space was now chaotic, a war zone. There was no sign of Parker, but the operatives were regrouping quickly, their guns raised. "Darren!" Musk shouted, but the noise of the chaos swallowed his words. He turned to find his ally, only to see him scrambling to his feet just a few feet away. His face was covered in dust, his eyes wide and alert, but there was no time for questions. They had to move fast. "We need to get out of here. Now," Darren said, his voice firm and urgent. "They'll have reinforcements any minute. You got a plan?" Musk nodded, his mind racing as he surveyed the environment. There had to be a way out. He spotted a large stack of crates near the back of the warehouse, offering a potential exit route if they could get there fast enough. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was their only shot. "Over there," Musk said, gesturing toward the crates. "We run for it. Now." With a final glance at the operatives, who were still recovering from the explosion, Musk and Darren sprinted toward the back of the warehouse. The sounds of footsteps pounding against the floor and the shouts of operatives chasing them echoed behind them. Musk's heart was racing, but his mind stayed focused. Survive. That's all that mattered now. As they neared the crates, another explosion rang out, this one much closer. Musk was knocked forward by the force of it, his legs nearly giving out from under him. But he didn't fall. He couldn't. He wasn't about to die here, not like this. Not when he still had a chance to stop whatever had started. "Keep moving," Darren yelled, pulling Musk to his feet. "Get to the crates, we need cover." They dove behind the stack of crates, their breaths heavy in the smoky air. Musk's head throbbed, and the taste of blood lingered in his mouth. He didn't have time to worry about the injuries, there was only one thing on his mind now: survival. From behind the crates, Musk and Darren peeked out, assessing the situation. The operatives were closing in fast, but they had momentarily slowed their pursuit, likely due to the blast and the confusion it caused. Musk knew it wouldn't be long before they regrouped and came after them again. They needed a plan. And fast. "Do you have any way to contact anyone outside?" Musk asked, his voice strained. Darren shook his head, his expression grim. "The network's been compromised. We're on our own, Musk." The only way out of this is to take down the operatives before they can overwhelm us. Musk's mind spun, trying to think of a way to turn the tables. He had been in tight situations before, but this felt different. The odds were stacked against them. There was no backup, no way to get to the authorities in time. They were on their own in a battle they had only just begun to understand. "Wait," Musk said suddenly, his voice sharp. He grabbed Darren's arm, pulling him close. "I remember something. The safe house, there was a security system built into the facility. The blast might have triggered a failsafe." Darren's eyes lit up with realization. "You think the system's still online?" "It's worth a shot. If we can access it, we might be able to hack the security and lock down the warehouse. At least buy us some time." Darren nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. "Let's go." They quickly moved toward a side door that Musk remembered passing earlier. It was connected to the facility's control room, where the security system was managed. The operatives were still distracted, but it wouldn't last long. They had to move quickly. When they reached the door, Musk pulled out his portable hacking device, a small, inconspicuous piece of technology he always carried with him. It had been a long time since he had to use it for anything serious, but now, he was glad he had it. "Get ready," Musk muttered, his fingers flying over the small keyboard. The device hummed to life as he connected to the facility's mainframe. For a moment, the screen was just a mess of code, lines and lines of data, all flashing too quickly for Musk to follow. But he had done this before. He could do it again. Come on," Musk muttered under his breath as he worked. He could feel the pressure mounting. The operatives would be on them any second. Sweat beaded on his forehead as his fingers moved faster. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the screen flickered and displayed a green light. "Access granted." "Got it," Musk said triumphantly, his voice almost drowned out by the sounds of gunfire approaching from the other side of the door. Without wasting another second, he typed in the command to lock down the entire facility. The lights in the warehouse flickered, and a loud clanking noise echoed through the building. The heavy metal doors on the other side of the warehouse began to slide down, sealing the operatives inside the warehouse. Musk let out a breath of relief, his body sagging against the doorframe for a moment. But the relief was short-lived. "They'll try to override the system," Darren said, looking around. "We've bought ourselves a few minutes, but not much more." Musk nodded. "Then let's make them count." Suddenly, a voice boomed over the loudspeakers, cutting through the silence. "Elon Musk. This is your final warning. Surrender now, or we will eliminate everyone you care about. You are out of time." The voice was deep, distorted, robotic, even. Musk's heart sank. They knew who he was. They knew everything. And then the lights flickered again, before plunging them into complete darkness. The door creaked open behind them, sending a chill down Musk's spine. The sound was haunting in the otherwise still tunnel, a foreboding reminder that they were no longer alone. Someone, or something, was following them. Musk's grip on the device tightened as he urged Darren forward, his mind racing for any way to outwit their pursuers. "Stay close," Musk whispered urgently. His voice was low but intense. There was no room for mistakes now. The slightest misstep would cost them everything. Darren nodded, his face set in grim determination, but his eyes betrayed the fear that had settled deep within him. They both knew they couldn't afford to stop. Not now. Not when their every move was being monitored. The tunnel ahead was narrow, claustrophobic even, with rusty pipes running along the walls. The distant sound of boots echoed louder with every passing second, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut through. Musk could feel the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. They were closing in. The operatives had found them. "We need to make it to the control room," Musk muttered to Darren. "If we can lock them out, we might have a chance." But the control room was still several hundred yards ahead, and there was no guarantee they'd make it without being caught. Time was running out faster than he could process, and the oppressive silence of the tunnel made it worse. Every moment felt like an eternity. As they moved deeper into the maze of tunnels, the unmistakable sound of footsteps grew nearer. It wasn't just one person anymore, it sounded like a whole team was after them. Musk could almost feel their breath on the back of his neck, the pressure mounting with every step they took. He glanced at Darren, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. There was no need for words. They both knew what was at stake. The faint sound of static broke the tension as the loudspeaker crackled to life again, this time with a new message, closer, almost mocking. "You think you can outrun us?" Musk clenched his fists. Whoever this was, whoever had orchestrated this, they were playing a dangerous game. And Musk wasn't the type to lose. "Get ready," Musk said through gritted teeth. "We're almost there." They turned a sharp corner, and the tunnel began to widen slightly. The walls were no longer as close, but it also meant they were exposed. There would be no hiding here. Musk knew they were running out of options. They had to move quickly. The control room was just ahead, and with it, their last chance. But just as hope flickered in Musk's chest, the unmistakable sound of footsteps became a sudden, deafening presence. They weren't alone anymore. The operatives had caught up with them, and they were about to face the inevitable. Before Musk could react, the first operative appeared in the tunnel ahead, blocking their path. He was tall, with a stern expression and a gun raised in his hand. His movements were deliberate and controlled, as if this was all part of the plan. "Don't move," the operative commanded, his voice cold and emotionless. Musk stopped in his tracks, every muscle in his body tense. Darren was beside him, his breath quick and shallow, but his eyes never wavered from the operative in front of them. "Who are you?" Musk demanded, his voice firm, though he couldn't hide the tension creeping in. "What do you want?" The operative didn't respond. Instead, he took a step forward, his eyes flicking to Musk's device in his hand. He seemed to recognize it immediately. "It's over, Musk," the operative said, his voice now laced with something far more sinister. "You've been out of your depth from the start. You really thought you could escape this?" Musk's heart pounded in his chest. They were right, he had underestimated just how far these people were willing to go. But he wasn't going to give up now. Not after everything he'd been through. He could feel the fight rising within him, a burning determination that refused to be extinguished. "You're wrong," Musk said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "I'm not going down without a fight." The operative's lips twisted into something resembling a smirk, and he raised his gun, aiming it directly at Musk's chest. In that instant, the air in the tunnel seemed to thicken, as if time itself had frozen. Musk's mind raced, "What do I do?" The reality of the situation was sinking in fast. He didn't have a weapon, and there was nowhere to run. The tunnel was a dead end, and the operative was too close. There was only one thing left to do, use his mind. Musk's fingers moved almost instinctively as he fiddled with his device, quickly entering a series of commands. The operative didn't seem to notice at first, too focused on his target. "Let me guess," Musk said, trying to buy time. "You're working for someone. The same person who's been feeding you information, right?" The operative's eyes flickered, a brief flash of something behind his cold exterior. It was almost imperceptible, but Musk saw it. The operative's grip on his gun tightened, and Musk's heart skipped a beat. "Who are you really?" Musk pressed, his voice sharper now. "What do you want from me?" Before the operative could respond, Musk's device beeped loudly, indicating that the lockout system was almost online. It was a long shot, but if the system activated, they might have a chance. In a split second, Musk lunged, pushing Darren to the side as he rushed toward the operative. The move was fast, too fast for the operative to react. Musk tackled him, knocking the gun out of his hands and sending it clattering across the floor. Get to the control room. Musk shouted at Darren, his breath ragged. I'll hold him off. Darren didn't hesitate. Without a word, he sprinted past Musk, heading for the control room. Musk could hear his footsteps pounding against the floor as he moved, but his focus remained on the operative. The man was struggling beneath him, trying to push Musk off, but Musk was quicker. He grabbed the operative's collar and pulled his face close, staring into his cold eyes. Tell me who's behind this, Musk growled. Before the operative could answer, another voice echoed from the tunnel, this one unmistakably familiar. Elon, don't waste your time. Musk's head snapped up, his heart racing. There, at the end of the tunnel, stood none other than Ava. Ava's cold eyes locked with Musk's. Why don't you just give up, she said, her voice smooth and controlled. It's already too late. Musk's blood ran cold. Ava? She's part of this too. And then, the lights flickered once again. The words hung in the air like a weight. Ava. The last person Musk ever expected to see in this situation, standing at the entrance of the tunnel, with that infuriatingly calm expression on her face. Why? Musk's voice came out hoarse, a mixture of shock and disbelief. His mind struggled to process the reality in front of him. Ava's lips curled into a smirk, but there was no warmth in it. You really thought I was on your side, didn't you? She said, her voice dripping with cold satisfaction. Musk's heart pounded in his chest, his pulse quickening as the air around him seemed to thicken. What the hell is going on, Ava? Who are you working for? His gaze flicked between her and the operative he'd just overpowered. Ava stepped into the dim light of the tunnel, her silhouette cutting a sharp figure against the harsh glow of the security lights. She wasn't here by accident. She wasn't a victim of circumstance. She was in control. Did you really think I was just another one of your employees? Ava continued, her tone almost mocking. Did you honestly believe I would follow you forever, that I was just another pawn in your game? Her words were laced with venom. Musk had always thought of Ava as a confidant, someone he could trust. But now, that trust was shattered, like glass falling from a height. The operative Musk had knocked down groaned beneath him, his hand reaching for his fallen gun. Musk quickly grabbed it, pointing it at the operative to stop him from making a move. But all of his attention was on Ava now. Who are you working for? Musk demanded again, his voice firm, his entire body tense. Ava finally gave him a full smile, a cold, calculating grin that made Musk's stomach churn. You still don't get it, do you? I'm not working for anyone. I'm working with someone. The ones who see things differently. Musk felt a chill run through him. His instincts told him he was on the edge of something far deeper and more dangerous than he'd anticipated. There was more to Ava than he had ever realized. Your whole life has been about control, Musk. About dominating everything you touch. But it's not your world to dominate, Ava said, her voice growing quieter, but more insistent. It's time for a new order. One where people like me have power. Where you're the one who's left behind. Musk's mind raced as he tried to process her words. This is about power. You're betraying me for power. His voice was filled with a mixture of disbelief and anger. He couldn't fathom what she was saying, the reality of it hitting him like a punch to the gut. Ava's laugh was short, almost bitter. You think you're the only one who can shape the future? I've had enough of watching you play God with everything, running companies, shaping industries. I've watched you create things that change the world, but at what cost? How many lives have you destroyed along the way, Musk? You can't see the damage because you're too busy building your own empire. Her words cut deeper than Musk could have expected. He had always known the stakes were high, always knew there were sacrifices to be made, but hearing it from someone so close to him, someone who had been part of his world, made it all feel real in a way he hadn't anticipated. But why me, Ava? Musk said, his voice cracking with frustration. Why did you stay so close, just to betray me now? Was I just a tool to you? Ava's gaze softened for the briefest moment, as if she were considering his words. But then the coldness returned. You were never just a tool. You were the catalyst. Your fall will create the chaos we need. The world is ready for something new, something beyond your limited vision. Musk was still processing her words when a sudden sound echoed through the tunnel, a shrill, alarm-like noise that rang out from deep within the compound. The countdown. Time's almost up, Ava said, her tone now almost pitying. You've run out of time, Musk. You always did think you had all the answers, didn't you? In that instant, a heavy door at the far end of the tunnel slid open, and a group of heavily armed men stormed in. They were operatives, high-tech, well-trained, and ready for action. Ava stepped aside, allowing them to pass, her eyes never leaving Musk's. You're finished, she said, her voice like ice. And when they take you down, I'll be the one to rise. This world is changing, Musk. And you're not going to be part of it. Musk's heart sank. This was it. His greatest fear realized, Ava, the person he trusted, was now part of the force that would bring him down. He was no longer the one calling the shots. It had all been a carefully orchestrated lie. The operatives closed in, their guns raised, their eyes fixed on Musk. Musk felt the weight of the situation crash down on him. He had lost his edge. His empire was crumbling, piece by piece, and now, it was time to face the consequences. His mind raced for a way out, but there was no escape this time. There was nowhere left to run. We're not done yet, Musk growled, his voice steady despite the oncoming storm. The operatives paused, sensing the tension in the air. Ava gave him one last look, something unreadable in her eyes. Oh, I think we are. Before Musk could react, the first of the operatives lunged forward, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back. The pressure was unbearable, but Musk resisted, his mind still racing, his heart still fighting. With a swift motion, one of the operatives placed a black hood over Musk's head, plunging him into total darkness. What happens next? Will Musk survive this betrayal? Everything Musk had built, his empire, his reputation, was slipping away, and the people he trusted most were turning against him. The hood felt suffocating as it was pulled over Musk's head. His senses were immediately overwhelmed by the absence of light, the air thick and heavy against his skin. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. How had it all gone so wrong? His heart pounded in his chest, each beat resonating in his ears as the weight of Ava's betrayal settled deeper in his bones. She had been his confidant, his ally, the one person he thought he could rely on. But now, she was part of the shadowy force working against him, and the betrayal cut deeper than any physical blow. The sound of footsteps echoed in the tunnel, growing fainter as Musk was pulled along. He struggled to keep his bearings, his mind a flurry of questions and fear. Where were they taking him? What did they want from him now? The operatives didn't speak. Their hands were firm but not rough, as they guided him down what felt like a long corridor. Musk's movements were limited by the tight grip they had on his arms, and the hood prevented him from seeing anything. His mind worked overtime, trying to process every detail, but there was nothing to latch onto. The disorienting walk felt like an eternity, and with each step, the grip of uncertainty tightened around him. Eventually, they reached a door. The sound of a keypad being entered followed by a metallic click signaled their arrival. Musk was pushed forward, into what felt like a small, confined space. The door slammed shut behind him with a deafening thud, sealing him inside. The hood was yanked off, and Musk blinked rapidly as his eyes adjusted to the dim, flickering lights overhead. He was in a small, concrete cell, bare, uninviting, and cold. His feet sank into the hard floor, and the air felt stale, like it had been trapped for too long. He scanned the room quickly. A single steel bed with a thin mattress against the wall, a small metal toilet in the corner, and a solitary steel door with a tiny barred window. There were no windows to the outside world, just walls, as far as the eye could see. He was trapped. The realization hit Musk with a force he couldn't shake off. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching the door. He stood up quickly, ready to face whatever came next, his hands clenched into fists by his sides. The door creaked open, and a familiar face emerged. Ava. Musk's blood ran cold at the sight of her. After everything that had happened, here she was, standing in front of him, looking completely unfazed by the pain she had caused. "Surprised to see me?" Ava's voice was sharp, almost cruel. "I figured you would be. I think you overestimated your ability to stay in control." Musk took a step forward, his mind now clearer than ever. "You have no idea what you've done, Ava. You've made a mistake." Ava didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped further into the room, her posture relaxed as though they were merely having a conversation, not locked in a battle of life and death. "A mistake," she repeated, her lips curling into a tight smile. "I've done exactly what I needed to do. I don't regret a thing." Musk's fists clenched tighter. His anger was beginning to boil over, but he knew he had to keep his cool. "You've betrayed everyone who trusted you. You're not just destroying me, you're destroying everything we built. You're blind if you think this will work in the long run." Ava didn't seem fazed by his words. She stepped closer, her face now inches from his. The coldness in her eyes was unmistakable. "You never saw it coming, did you, Elon? You think you understand the world, but you never understood me." Musk's chest tightened. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, but a nagging feeling told him that none of his words would make any difference. Ava had already made her choice. She wasn't the woman he thought she was. Her voice dropped to a low, almost conspiratorial tone. "You're right about one thing. You were blind to my true intentions. But now, I'm in control. And you? You're just a pawn in the game. The clock is ticking, Elon. Soon, you'll realize just how far gone you really are." Before Musk could respond, Ava turned sharply, her heels clicking against the cold concrete floor as she walked back toward the door. She paused just before leaving, her hand resting on the frame as she looked back one final time. "Oh, and don't think anyone's coming for you," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're alone now. You'll rot in this cell just like you deserve." With that, she disappeared through the door, leaving Musk alone in the oppressive silence of his new prison. Musk stood still for a moment, his mind spinning with a million thoughts. He could feel the walls closing in around him, suffocating him with each passing second. Ava had taken everything from him, his trust, his allies, and his freedom. But there was one thing she hadn't taken, his determination. "I won't stay here forever," Musk thought fiercely, his mind working through the possibilities. There had to be a way out. There was always a way out. He just needed to find it. The minutes stretched into hours as Musk sat on the bed, his mind relentlessly strategizing. He would not let Ava, or anyone else, win. The world might be changing, but Musk wasn't done yet. There was still time. But the sound of footsteps outside his cell, faint but unmistakable, reminded him that he wasn't alone. His enemies were closing in. And Ava? She wasn't just an enemy anymore. She was his greatest threat. A loud clanging sound echoed from the hallway, followed by a soft voice, one Musk recognized instantly. "Time's running out, Musk. You don't have much longer." Musk's heart skipped a beat. Who was this new player? And what did they want from him now? The clanging sound outside his cell was growing louder, echoing down the narrow corridor. Musk's heart quickened. He had been through a lot, faced countless challenges, but this felt different. He wasn't just up against corporate rivals or even government officials anymore. He was trapped in a labyrinth of deception, and Ava, someone he had once trusted, was at the heart of it. The voice outside his cell had been soft but clear, and now Musk strained to hear more, desperate for any sign of who was behind this new turn of events. The footsteps grew closer, and the small barred window in his cell door flickered with the faintest movement. Someone was standing outside, watching him. Musk stood up from the bed slowly, careful not to make any unnecessary noise. He didn't know who was out there, but there was something in the air that told him it wasn't just another guard or an agent working for Ava. There was a certain quality to the silence, an understanding in the way the figure moved. Whoever it was, they were being deliberate. Silent. His instincts flared. Could this be an ally? Musk thought, his mind scrambling for answers. The thought seemed impossible, after everything that had happened, after being betrayed by the one person he thought he could trust. But there was no time to dwell on doubt. He needed to act. He needed answers. The door creaked open suddenly, and Musk braced himself, preparing for whatever might come next. A tall, slender woman stepped into the room. She was dressed in dark tactical gear, her face partially hidden by a mask, but her eyes, those eyes were familiar. Musk froze. He knew her. It was Claire. Claire was one of the high-level engineers from Tesla, a brilliant mind, loyal to a fault, but one Musk had not seen in years. How had she ended up here, in the middle of this mess? He thought she had left the company after the restructuring, moved on to other projects. But now, she was standing in front of him, and the look in her eyes suggested she wasn't here to hurt him. "Elon," she said, her voice low and steady, "we don't have much time." Musk's heart skipped a beat. He had to process everything that had led him here, but right now, Claire's presence was his only lifeline. The walls that had felt so suffocating just moments ago now seemed less pressing. He wasn't alone anymore. "Claire," Musk breathed, taking a cautious step toward her. Why are you here?" She glanced around quickly, her eyes darting toward the door. "I've been tracking this operation for months, Elon. When things went sideways at Tesla, I knew something bigger was coming. When I saw you go off the grid, when Ava made her move, I knew I couldn't just sit back. I had to come for you." Musk's mind raced. Claire had been watching him, keeping tabs on the situation. She knew what was happening with Ava. But why now? "What's your plan?" "You have to get me out of here." Claire nodded. "That's the plan, but not in the way you think. I'm not here to break you out right now, not yet. There's more at play here than just Ava. Much more." Musk's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? Who else is involved?" Claire hesitated before answering, her eyes narrowing as if she were weighing her words. "There are others, Elon. Powerful forces. People you've never met. People who've been pulling strings in the background for a long time. Ava isn't just a rogue operative, she's part of something much bigger. This is just the beginning of a much larger plan." Musk felt a knot form in his stomach. He'd known Ava had connections, but this was bigger than anything he had imagined. He wasn't just in a corporate struggle, he was in the middle of a covert war, with powerful players all vying for control of the future. "What do they want?" Musk asked, his voice sharp with urgency. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice further. "Control of the technology you've been building, Elon. The same technology you've worked your entire life to perfect. But it's not just about profits or power for them. They want to rewrite the world order, and they know you're in their way." Musk's mind was reeling. He had always known that his work at SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink would have a massive impact on the world, but this was something else entirely. People were willing to destroy him to gain control over the very future he had been trying to create. "They can't have it," Musk said, his voice hardening with conviction. "I'll stop them. I won't let them destroy everything." Claire nodded. I know. That's why I'm here. But we need to be smart. They've already got their hooks in too deep, and Ava is just the tip of the iceberg. They'll be watching every move you make. Musk took a deep breath, pushing aside the panic that threatened to bubble up. He had been through worse, he'd faced setbacks before, battles of all kinds. This wouldn't be the end. Not if he could help it. But the question lingered, who could he trust? Claire gave him a pointed look, almost as though she could hear his thoughts. There's more to this than you know, Elon. But right now, your best chance is to play along. Stay in the game. Wait for the right moment. When the time comes, I'll be there. How do you know that I can trust you? Musk asked, still guarded. Claire smiled, a faint but reassuring smile. You know me, Elon. I don't do things halfway. We're in this together. And we'll make sure Ava doesn't win. You have my word. Musk let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The words didn't erase the fear or the uncertainty, but they did give him something to hold on to, an ally in the darkness. You need to go now, Claire said, stepping back toward the door. You need to be patient. The people watching you are far more dangerous than you think. But the plan is in motion. I'll be back when the time is right. Hang on, Elon. We're not done yet. Before Musk could say anything more, Claire was gone, disappearing into the shadows as silently as she had arrived. The door slammed shut behind her with an eerie finality. And once again, Musk was alone. But this time, the uncertainty didn't feel as heavy. He wasn't fighting alone anymore. Claire was out there, working with him, not against him. And together, they would bring Ava down. Musk sat back down on the bed, his mind racing with the new information. But something was off. The flicker of light in the corner of the room caught his eye. The faintest shadow moved. Someone was watching him from outside the cell. A sudden chill ran down his spine. The hairs on Musk's neck stood up as his eyes darted to the corner of the room. There, in the dim light, he thought he saw the shadow of movement, a figure standing just beyond the bars of the small window in his cell door. The silhouette was faint, barely perceptible, but it was unmistakably there. Someone's watching me. His pulse quickened. Claire had just left, and he hadn't heard anyone else approach. Had Ava sent another one of her agents to keep an eye on him? Or was it someone else entirely? The shadows seemed to pulse with the weight of uncertainty. For a moment, Musk stayed still, pretending to focus on the floor, his breath shallow. If someone was out there, he didn't want to alert them. They might not be a friend. The shadow moved again, slowly, almost deliberately, as though whoever it was didn't want to be noticed. Musk's eyes narrowed. This person wasn't here to just guard him, they were here to gather information, to watch him, to study his next move. But what did they want from him? Why didn't they confront him directly? Musk took a deep breath, his mind calculating his next steps. He had no idea who it was, but there was one thing he did know, he couldn't let himself be caught off guard again. He couldn't make the same mistake twice. Ava had already thrown him into this mess, and now, whoever this was, they were just another part of the puzzle. Silence hung thick in the air. No more movement. No sound. It was as if the world had frozen in place, waiting for something to happen. Musk stood, walking carefully to the door, his eyes never leaving the shadow. His footsteps were light, almost soundless as he approached. He needed answers, and the only way to get them was to take a risk. He reached the door, placing his hands against the cold metal. His breath fogged up the bars of the small window, and as he exhaled, he caught the slightest glimpse of the figure outside, just a shadow, an outline of someone standing still. There was no way to know if it was a guard or someone from Ava's network, but it didn't feel like it. This felt different, calculated, quiet. Who's there? Musk asked, his voice low but firm. The figure didn't respond. Musk's heart hammered in his chest. He couldn't just stand here forever. His mind raced, weighing his options. Should he wait for whoever it was to make the next move? Or should he force the situation, take control of the moment? A soft sound, barely audible, echoed from the other side of the door. It was the sound of something scraping, like metal on metal. Musk's eyes widened. Whoever was there was doing something. Was it a key? A lock being tampered with? His mind spun with the possibilities. "Who are you?" Musk asked again, this time louder, more urgent. "What do you want?" There was a brief pause, and then a voice, low, raspy, almost whispered, came through the door. "You've been marked, Musk." The words sent a chill down Musk's spine. He recognized the tone immediately. It was cold, dispassionate. Whoever was on the other side knew something he didn't, and they weren't here to offer him comfort. "Marked?" Musk repeated, his voice tinged with confusion. "What do you mean? Who are you?" The shadow outside the door shifted, and for a brief moment, Musk thought he saw the outline of a hand against the metal. But then the figure spoke again, their voice almost mocking. "You think you're still in control of this, don't you? You think you can win. But it's already too late for that. The game has changed, Musk. You've crossed lines that shouldn't have been crossed." Musk felt a knot tighten in his chest. What was this person talking about? What game? And how had he crossed lines? He had been focused only on surviving, on getting back into the fight. But this was something else. "Who are you working for?" Musk pressed, trying to keep his voice steady. "Is this about Ava? What's she planning?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, they stepped back, retreating from the door. Musk's heart raced. Were they leaving? Were they done with him? Just as he was about to give up hope of getting any more information, a faint sound came from the window, an object being slid through the bars. Musk's eyes flicked down, and he saw it, a small metallic object. It was a key to his cell. For a moment, Musk simply stared at the key, disbelief rising in his chest. This was it, the opportunity he'd been waiting for. Whoever was on the other side had just given him the means to escape. But why? Why would someone who had been so cryptic and threatening suddenly offer him the means to break free? What were they trying to achieve? Before Musk could make a move, the voice spoke again, low and steady, carrying through the silence. "Don't waste this opportunity, Musk. Once you leave this place, there's no going back. There's a storm coming, one that you can't stop. But you might just be able to survive it, if you're smart. Use this key wisely." With that, the figure was gone. Musk was left standing there, staring at the key in his hand. His mind raced. There was no time to waste. But was this a trap? Was this part of the larger game that he didn't yet understand? Without wasting another second, Musk unlocked the door, stepping into the unknown. He had no plan. No backup. Just a key, a sense of urgency, and a relentless desire to survive. The door swung open with a creak, and Musk stepped into the dark corridor. The moment he passed the threshold, a sense of foreboding washed over him. Every step felt like a countdown, an invisible clock ticking away his future. He had no idea who was behind this, what game they were playing, or why they had given him a chance. But one thing was certain, he couldn't stay here. Not when there was a chance to get back into the fight. Musk crept down the corridor, his every sense on high alert. His heart was still racing, but now, there was a fire inside him. He wasn't out of danger yet. Not by a long shot. But he was alive. And as long as he was alive, he still had a chance to win. A sound came from behind him, a low, creeping hiss. Musk froze in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the darkness. There, standing in the shadows, was another figure, someone new. And this one wasn't here to offer him a key. Musk's heart skipped a beat as he turned slowly toward the figure lurking in the shadows behind him. His breath hitched in his chest as the figure's outline became clearer, but this person was no mere guard or agent. This person moved with an eerie calmness, as if they knew exactly what they were doing. Their silhouette was tall, athletic, with a hooded figure that obscured most of their face, yet their posture screamed authority. For a split second, Musk's mind reeled with possibilities. Is this another part of Ava's operation? He wondered. But something about the stranger's presence felt different, more menacing, more calculated. The figure didn't speak right away, their silence stretching like an unspoken threat in the dimly lit hallway. Musk instinctively took a step back, his eyes narrowing, his pulse quickening. Every muscle in his body tensed. Whoever this person was, they weren't here to negotiate. Musk clenched his fists, readying himself for whatever was coming next. His mind raced through every possible scenario, but none of them seemed to line up with this new development. He had escaped from his cell, sure, but there was something unsettling about the way the figure stood there, almost waiting. The stranger took a step forward, the light from a nearby overhead bulb briefly illuminating their face. The hood was pulled back just enough to reveal the faint outline of a mask, a sleek, black mask with silver streaks running across it, almost like a design etched into the surface. Musk's breath caught in his throat. This isn't a normal agent. I wouldn't do that, Musk, the stranger finally said, their voice cold and calculating, almost robotic in nature. There was no warmth to it, only a chilling sense of inevitability. You might have gotten out of your cell, but the game isn't over. Not by a long shot. Musk's gaze hardened. Who are you? He demanded, his voice sharp. What do you want? The figure didn't answer immediately, instead taking another slow, deliberate step forward. It's not about what I want, they replied, their voice devoid of emotion. It's about what's already been set in motion. You're not the one pulling the strings anymore. You're just a piece on the board. Musk's stomach tightened as a realization slowly began to dawn on him. This person wasn't here to hurt him, not directly, anyway. They weren't working for Ava, at least not in the way he'd expected. But they were part of something far bigger. A bigger plan, a bigger game. A flash of movement caught Musk's eye as the figure reached into their coat. For a moment, he thought they might pull out a weapon, but instead, they retrieved a small, sleek device. The device clicked open in their hands, revealing a holographic screen that projected faint blue light into the dark corridor. You're not the only one with access to the technology that could change everything, the stranger said cryptically, tapping a few buttons on the device. The screen flickered for a moment, then displayed a series of maps, data streams, and diagrams that Musk recognized. Some of them were from SpaceX, others from Tesla, and even from Neuralink. What the hell is this? Musk muttered, his mind racing. It's a visual representation of the new reality, Musk, the figure replied, their words almost too cold to process. The one you're being forced into. Your companies, your technology, everything you've built, it's being co-opted. You were never meant to be in control. You're a cog in the machine, and you're only just starting to realize it. Musk's brain fired into overdrive as he processed the implications of what the figure was saying. Co-opted? A cog in the machine? No. He couldn't let that happen. He had built these companies from the ground up, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink. They weren't just businesses, they were his legacy. He couldn't let them fall into the hands of someone else. Not like this. He clenched his fists, standing taller as his fear morphed into defiance. You don't get to control me, Musk said, his voice low but steady, his gaze unwavering. I've worked too hard to let anyone take what's mine. The figure seemed unmoved, as though Musk's words were meaningless to them. You misunderstand, Musk. You never had control. You think you've been steering the ship, but you've only been riding the current. And now, the current is taking you somewhere you don't want to go. Before Musk could respond, the stranger's hand snapped out with lightning speed, pressing a button on their device. The screen flickered again, showing a series of video feeds, all pointing to different locations, factories, research centers, even the SpaceX launch facilities. The pieces are already moving, the figure said, their voice colder now. They've infiltrated every aspect of your work. You can't escape them, no matter how hard you try. You're already too deep. Musk's mind reeled. It was all coming into focus. This was bigger than just him, bigger than Ava. Whoever this figure was, they were part of something much more sinister, something far more advanced. And they were telling him that he had already lost. A sense of urgency surged within him, rising through his chest like a tidal wave. You think you've won? Musk shot back, stepping toward the figure. You think I'm going to just sit here and let you take everything I've worked for? The figure didn't flinch. No, they replied, almost as if they were pitying him. But it's not your choice anymore. You're not the one making the decisions. Musk felt his stomach churn with the gravity of their words. He had to break free, he had to find a way to outsmart this invisible enemy before they took everything from him. But with every step he took toward that goal, the walls around him seemed to close in tighter. The figure remained still, unmoving, letting Musk absorb the weight of their words. Then, without another glance, they turned on their heel and began walking away, their footsteps echoing faintly in the corridor. The sound of their retreating steps sent a cold shiver down Musk's spine. You'll see soon enough, Musk, the stranger said over their shoulder. You'll see the truth in time. But by then, it will be too late. Musk stood in the empty hallway, frozen in place. His mind whirled with the implications of what had just happened. The walls of the facility felt more suffocating than ever, and the weight of the stranger's words hung heavy in the air. For the first time since all of this had started, Musk wasn't sure where to go next. Who could he trust? Who was pulling the strings, and how could he fight back against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere, always one step ahead? The path forward was unclear, but one thing was certain, the battle had only just begun. The words on Musk's phone screen seemed to burn into his retinas as he read them again, and again, and again. The storm is closer than you think. Trust no one. His mind raced. Who had sent this message? Was it the figure who had just confronted him, or was it someone else entirely? The cryptic warning felt like a cold slap to the face. The thought of trusting no one was terrifying in itself. Musk had always relied on his network, his team, his friends, the people he trusted to help him make decisions, push boundaries, and navigate his companies through the stormy waters of the tech world. To hear that he couldn't trust anyone anymore sent a chill down his spine. He felt a cold wave of isolation wash over him. Who could he even count on now? Ava had already played him like a pawn, and this mysterious figure had just revealed how deep the conspiracy against him really ran. And now, this anonymous message, was it a warning, or was it meant to confuse him? Musk's fingers trembled as he typed a response, but he stopped before he could hit send. What good would it do? The message was already clear, there was something coming. Something dangerous. But what? And why now? Was this an enemy he could fight? Or was the storm something bigger than anything he could control? His mind couldn't stop spiraling. He had worked so hard to bring the future to life, to make a real, tangible difference in the world. But now, everything felt like it was unraveling. He had been manipulated, misled, and now it seemed as if every corner he turned led to a new layer of betrayal. Suddenly, the screen of his phone flickered again. The message was there, staring at him in the darkened hallway. Musk hesitated for a moment, then tapped on the notification. The message opened with a new line of text. The storm isn't coming, Musk. It's already here. You're in it now. Get out while you still can. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He didn't have much time to process the message when his phone buzzed again. But this time, the incoming call wasn't from an unknown number, it was from Claire. Musk's stomach tightened. He had no idea what she knew. For all he knew, she could be in on this entire scheme, or worse, working for the people behind it. But if there was a chance she had information, he couldn't afford to ignore it. He answered the call, trying to mask the unease in his voice. Claire. Elon, we need to talk, she said, her voice low, almost strained. It was a tone Musk had never heard from her before, urgent and frantic. What's going on? Musk asked, keeping his voice calm despite the tension he could feel building inside him. Not over the phone. I'm coming to you now, but we don't have much time, Claire said, her voice trembling. They're watching you. They've been watching you for weeks. They know everything. Musk felt his heart stop. He couldn't think straight. Who was she talking about? Who's been watching him? Claire, Musk started, but before he could finish his sentence, the call abruptly cut off. Musk stared at the screen, his fingers gripping the phone tightly. It was all too much. His head was spinning. Was Claire really trying to help him, or was she just another part of the game? He couldn't afford to trust anyone blindly anymore, not with the stakes as high as they were. A cold, harsh laugh echoed from the darkness behind him. Musk froze, his eyes snapping toward the source of the sound. He had no idea who was there, but it wasn't Claire, it was someone else. Someone who had been watching him. The shadowy figure had returned. This time, however, the figure didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. It stood tall, its features obscured by the darkness, but the ominous sense of danger that surrounded it was unmistakable. Musk's heart pounded in his chest. Whoever this was, they were ready to make their move. You're too late, Musk, the figure said, their voice colder than before. The storm is already here. You just haven't realized how bad it's going to get. Musk's pulse quickened. His mind raced, trying to piece together what this could mean. But before he could say anything, the figure took a step forward, their silhouette shifting in the shadows like a predator closing in on its prey. I've been sent to make sure you don't get out of this mess alive, the figure continued, the threat in their words clear and final. But I'm not just here to kill you, Musk. No, there's something much worse in store for you. You're going to wish for death before this is over. Musk's breath caught in his throat. His legs felt like jelly, but he forced himself to stand tall, not letting fear show on his face. This wasn't just about his survival anymore, it was about everything he had built, everything he had worked for. What do you want from me? Musk demanded, his voice hardening. The figure tilted their head, almost as if amused. You'll learn soon enough. But for now, let me leave you with this, no matter how hard you fight, you're not going to win this. You're not as clever as you think you are, Musk. Musk's mind raced. No one speaks to me like this. The figure's words hit like daggers. The coldness, the finality in their voice, it was as if they had already written his fate in stone. But Musk wasn't ready to give up just yet. He had always thrived when faced with impossible odds. He was not about to let this shadowy figure, or whoever was pulling the strings behind them, decide how his story would end. In a flash, the figure reached into their coat and produced something, a small device that emitted a sharp, high-pitched noise. Musk's head spun, and his vision blurred. The world around him seemed to distort, as if the air itself had thickened. His legs felt weak, his mind growing foggy. The noise, the device, was affecting him. This was it. The figure had come to finish what had been started. Goodbye, Musk, the figure said, their voice barely audible over the ringing in Musk's ears. Everything in his body screamed for him to fight back, but his limbs refused to obey. The last thing Musk saw before everything went black was the figure stepping away, disappearing back into the shadows. Musk awoke with a violent start, gasping for air, his body drenched in sweat. The world around him was still dark, but this time, there was a different kind of silence, unnatural, suffocating. His hands shot up to his head as his senses slowly returned. Had it all been a dream? Had the figure been a hallucination, a manifestation of his fear? But as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, Musk noticed something on the floor in front of him, something he hadn't seen before, a small, black device, flashing a red light. And then the message appeared on the device's screen. "It's time to choose, Musk. Will you fight, or will you let them win?" Musk's heart pounded as he stared at the blinking device in front of him. The small black screen emitted a soft, eerie glow, and the red light continued to pulse, almost as if it were alive. His mind was racing, still struggling to piece together what had just happened. Was he drugged? Had everything up until this point been some sort of elaborate hallucination? He could feel the weight of everything pressing down on him, making it hard to breathe, to think. Fight or surrender? The message on the device seemed to mock him, taunting him with the choice he had to make. He had spent his entire life defying the odds, pushing boundaries, and achieving what others said was impossible. But now, faced with a faceless enemy and an invisible web of conspiracy, the stakes were higher than ever. He had already been betrayed by those closest to him, Ava, the mysterious figure in the shadows, even Claire, and now, this. The question felt like a punch to his gut. He clenched his fists, determined not to let fear paralyze him. This was his fight. It always had been. And there was no way he was going to let this be the end of his story. They think they've won. He thought. I've only just begun. He reached forward, grabbing the device from the ground. The flashing red light flickered for a moment, but as soon as he held it in his hands, the light turned green, and a new message appeared on the screen. You're not as clever as you think, Musk. But it doesn't matter. The wheels are in motion. You've been a part of something bigger than yourself, whether you realize it or not. Your choices no longer matter. Your actions have consequences, but the path has already been set. The words felt like a punch in the chest, but Musk's resolve didn't waver. The device might try to scare him, but it would never control him. He was a man who had spent his entire career taking risks, doing what others deemed impossible. And this, whatever this was, would not be his undoing. Musk stood up, the device still clutched tightly in his hand. He scanned his surroundings. The room was unfamiliar, cold and sterile, devoid of any warmth or comfort. It didn't feel like the place where he'd passed out, this was something else, something darker. In the back of his mind, he could still hear the voice of the mysterious figure, cold and unforgiving. You're not in control anymore. You never were. That was the most terrifying part. If it was true, if his worst fears were right, and he had been nothing more than a pawn, then what was the point of it all? Everything he had fought for, all the innovation, the technology, the dreams of creating a better world, was it all just part of some greater, sinister plan? No, Musk muttered under his breath. He refused to believe it. This was not how it ends. I control my fate. He turned his attention to the device again, wondering if there was something more it could reveal. His fingers hovered over the screen, but before he could touch anything, a new message appeared. You've had your warning, Musk. The storm is closing in. The end of this road is coming. Will you fight? Or will you fall into line like the others before you? Musk's jaw tightened. Falling into line was never an option for me. He didn't need to keep playing by their rules. He didn't need to let them dictate the terms of this battle. If there was one thing he knew for certain, it was that no one, not even the most powerful forces in the world, could control him. The truth was, Musk had always been a man of vision. He didn't just see the world as it was, he saw the world as it could be. And now, standing at this crossroads, with every force pulling him in different directions, he knew one thing, he had to keep fighting. He couldn't just give in, no matter how overwhelming the odds. Taking a deep breath, Musk dropped the device to the ground. He didn't need it. He didn't need their threats or their warnings. He had everything he needed already. His vision. His determination. His will to fight. He turned and walked toward the door of the room, determined to escape whatever trap had been set for him. But as his hand grasped the handle, he felt something shift, something in the air, a presence that hadn't been there before. He spun around, his eyes narrowing. The figure in the shadows was back, standing at the entrance, blocking his way. Musk's heart raced, but his body remained steady. The figure stood silently, their posture unchanging, their eyes hidden beneath the mask. "You can't escape, Musk," the figure said in that cold, robotic tone. "You're trapped. There's nowhere to run." Musk stared at them, his mind calculating, analyzing. The walls were closing in, but that only made him more determined to push back. He wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to back down. "I'm not trapped," Musk said, his voice unwavering. "You don't control me. You never did." The figure tilted their head, an almost imperceptible smirk playing at the corners of their mouth. "We'll see about that, won't we?" Without warning, the figure stepped forward, their movements swift and calculated, like a predator closing in on its prey. But Musk was ready. As the figure lunged toward him, he spun on his heel, ducking beneath their grasp and swiftly pulling himself into a defensive stance. This wasn't just about survival. It was about something bigger. It was about fighting back against the forces that sought to control him, to take everything from him. Musk launched himself toward the figure, determined to break free from their hold. It wasn't just about him anymore, it was about everything he had worked for. He wasn't going to let them win. The figure barely had time to react before Musk's hand shot out, grasping a nearby object, a metal rod, just in time to swing it across the figure's body. The blow sent the figure staggering backward, but they recovered quickly, their movements almost too fast to follow. "You think you can stop this?" the figure hissed, the mask's features distorting as their anger flared. "You've only just begun to understand the truth, Musk. It's already over." But Musk wasn't listening anymore. He was done waiting for answers. He swung again, and this time, the figure faltered. For the first time, Musk saw a crack in their composure, a hint of uncertainty. The storm might have been closing in, but he wasn't going to let it consume him. The final fight was about to begin. As the figure stumbled backward, Musk stepped closer, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Just when he thought he had gained the upper hand, the room around them began to shake. The walls trembled, and a low, rumbling noise filled the air. It was the storm. Musk's heart skipped a beat as the room seemed to collapse around him. He had no choice now. He had to survive. But as the figure vanished into the shadows, a final message appeared on Musk's device. "This is just the beginning. The storm is here to stay, and you won't survive without our help." Musk's grip tightened on the rod as he prepared to face the unknown, not knowing who he could trust, or what would happen next. The storm was far from over. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?